Tonight on Dispatches. Is your car as safe as you think?
I put my right arm up to hold myself in, and then it just kept flipping over. You don't think you're going to get out of that.
Are manufacturers doing enough to protect you and your family?
It would be as simple as just bolting those components on. And for reasons, whether it be fuel economy or cost savings, some manufacturers are making the choice not to put those components on.
And last year, VW played dirty on emissions. Will they come clean on safety?
All standard, yeah, 5-star income safety rating.
This is the second biggest purchase you'll ever make, and somebody's giving you wrong information.
Please remember, keep your eyes on the road at all times. Whoa! Looks like we've got a two-vehicle RTC. When we get there, let's have a line out, please, as soon as we can.
Humberside Fire and Rescue are called out to a road accident every day.
Casualty! Blue vehicle upside down!
Trapped and in pain.
All right, and you say you got pain in your pelvic and your neck area?
Yeah, down here.
Give these oxygen, just to help you a little bit, OK?
The team knows minutes really matter.
All right, what's his vitals like?
He's got a pulse rate of 90 and a breathing rate of 20.
Okay.
Nearly 200,000 people in the UK are injured or killed in traffic accidents every year.
Yeah, feet down first,
Listen
please.
to Sean, listen to Sean.
Good effort, lads.
Thanks, guys. OK. That was just a training exercise. But, you know, being in there was a pretty horrible reminder of just how dangerous our school runs, shopping trips and commutes can be.
Most of us assume our car will keep us safe. Danielle Bartley didn't question her car's safety features when she bought it.
You kind of take for granted that when you're buying a car, you're buying your safety with it. And when there was discussions about what the car included, but did I specifically ask, you know, does it have airbags, does it have this? No, I don't remember having that conversation at all. It was, how much is it, you know, what's the guarantee with it? Yeah, thank you very much. That's it.
After dropping her 7-year-old son Ethan at school, she set off for work along the M3 in pouring rain.
I was about to overtake another car and I drove into a massive pool of water. And as I went into it, the car just lost control, and when it started to aquaplane, I put my right arm up onto the roof to hold myself in, and then it just kept flipping over. It turned over 6 times, across the motorway and then up an embankment and back down again. I just kept thinking about my son and, you know, who's going to pick him up from school and who's going to tell him, and you don't think you're going to get out of that.
Danielle lost the arm she'd used to try and protect herself in the crash. With her new car, safety was the first thing on her mind.
You can't change anything that's happened. When I bought a car after my accident, it was completely different. I went off and I got loads of different brochures for cars, and I started reading the reviews and just seeing what scores that they got on safety. I've never done that before.
But can Danielle and all of us trust those safety ratings? Remember the emissions scandal?
Volkswagen say 11 million cars could be affected, and it has set aside almost 5 billion to deal with the fallout.
Unlike emissions, which are only governed by European legislation, car safety has 2 checks. First, a basic level of protection set by EU law. Then a more stringent set of tests called the European New Car Assessment Programme, or NCAP. NCAP is funded by organisations like government bodies and test centres. In this dramatic footage filmed under scientific conditions, it crashes cars and then awards them stars for safety. 5 is the best. Manufacturers can use the results for marketing. But do those lab tests reflect what actually happens out on the road when cars crash for real?
Sweden is the spiritual home of this, the 3-point seatbelt. Side impact protection.
whiplash protection. Just think how many lives around the world have been saved by those 3 devices. Swedish insurance analyst Folksam has been doing its bit to improve car safety too. For decades, it's been examining car accidents in real life. Sometimes there are big differences between its scores for real-world crashes and the NCAP crash test results.
How are you? So, the Toyota Yaris, what can you tell me about this vehicle, Anders?
Well, when it was introduced, it got 5 stars in Euro NCAP. We have investigated a lot of real-world crashes, actually about 300 crashes. And it's not 5-star when we look at the more or less average.
Folksam only gave it 3 stars.
Now this one I know was a 5-star car at the time because a load of mates with kids rushed out and bought it for that very reason.
Yeah. When we analysed real-world crashes, it's average, a little bit better than average.
Let's have a peek inside, but I mean it looks like it's got a couple of airbags.
It has dual airbags, it has side airbags, it also has a whiplash protection.
So NCAP gave this 5 stars. What do Folksam give it?
3.
Folksam studied more than 250 models involved in real accidents. In some cases, cars do better than in the NCAP lab. But many more fared worse in real accidents. Most of those were small cars, which are more vulnerable in a crash.
Do you think we can trust your results more than Euro NCAP?
I mean, you should always trust real world more than crash test, but it gives you a different picture of the safety. If you're more concerned of the performance in high-speed crashes, crash test is much better actually. If you are looking at the performance in all crashes that occurs, real world is better.
These are just 2 examples of the hundreds of cars Folksam studied against their NCAP ratings. Renault told dispatchers,
"We are the first manufacturer to get 5 stars from Euro NCAP. We take safety very seriously and have delivered some of the safest new cars on sale in Europe."
In a statement, Toyota said,
"The Yaris is in line with competitor vehicles in that segment of the market. The new generation Yaris is a best pick according to Folksam."
So why is there sometimes a difference between lab tests that manufacturers use to convince us their cars are safe and the way things happen in the real world? In the United States, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety looked at 2 head-on crash tests that vehicles were passing with flying colours in the lab. Yet thousands of people were still dying or being seriously injured in head-on smashes on the highway. Could the problem be a different type of crash that cars weren't being tested for?
Most people don't crash full on into any vehicle. They actually try to avoid a crash. And when you avoid that crash, you're asking a smaller and smaller part of the car to absorb all of the energy of a 40-mile-an-hour crash. Well, that means that those structures have to be very strong.
All right, everything's set in the crash hole.
So the Insurance Institute introduced something called a small overlap test, a crash that impacts just 25% of the front of a car. When the tests began, they found nearly 3/4 of the cars tested crumpled in a way that could have killed the driver.
Manufacturers can do a variety of things to improve their performance in this small overlap test. Unfortunately, in Europe, they do not conduct a small overlap test yet. So improvements that are being made to vehicles in the US, we're not certain that those same improvements are being made to European models.
Captured on specialist cameras, NCAP tests various impacts, but they don't carry out the 25% small overlap crash. When it comes to head-on smashes, NCAP focuses mainly on the driver's side, although in the real world, passengers are affected too. Back in America, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety decided to carry out their new small overlap test on both sides of the car. This is a Toyota RAV4. The manufacturers improved safety on the driver's side, but in this crash test, the damage to the passenger side is much greater.
What we have here is the Toyota RAV4. So this vehicle is a good performer on the driver's side. And some of the things that we see added to this vehicle are here in the blue and the yellow. There are structures that strengthen this front end and also provide some energy absorption. If you look over here at the passenger side, those blue and those yellow components aren't here at all. And you can see that the structure has collapsed in on the survival space of the passenger. Manufacturers have all figured out how to fix this problem. It would be as simple as just bolting those components on over here. And for reasons, whether it be fuel economy or cost savings, some manufacturers are making the choice not to put those components on.
Toyota told dispatchers,
The IIHS small overlap test goes beyond the US safety requirements. After it was first introduced in 2012, we took immediate steps to enhance performance on the driver's side. Because the front structures are not symmetrical, making changes on both sides would have required considerable redesign and could not have been implemented as quickly. We've incorporated enhancements on both for vehicles built on Toyota's new platform.
On the 25% overlap test, NCAP said,
Euro NCAP performs tests where it can with the funds that it has. We believe the small overlap test is well suited to a short campaign to highlight the problem. It's fairly easy to resolve, and most manufacturers have improved the performance of their vehicles very quickly.
I guess what that Toyota research in the US is saying is that cars aren't symmetrical when it comes to safety. So what about those countries where the driver sits on the right-hand side rather than the left-hand side, such as here in the UK?
This is the latest snazzy ad for Hyundai's Tucson.
You could change your scenery.
In Europe, most of the 600 or so cars crash tested by NCAP are left-hand drive. When it comes to the safety of right-hand drive versions, NCAP relies on the manufacturers to show that both versions perform just as well in a smash.
The left-hand drive Tucson was given a 5-star rating when put through its paces by Euro NCAP. But when Australian NCAP testers looked at a right-hand drive version destined for their markets, they found a problem.
And that's raised concerns about NCAP's testing regime in the motoring press down under.
John, what did the Australian testers find out about the Hyundai Tucson?
This was a real shock. It failed the requirements for 5 stars because of a deficiency in the floor pan. The floor pan was not adequately rigid, and that basically led to the pedals moving too much.
This test was carried out last September and was dramatically filmed in slow-mo. This model isn't sold in the UK, but the brake pedal is pushed back an excessive distance. It may not sound much, but it could lead to serious leg injuries.
When these pedals come back in towards the driver, what damage can it cause?
If the pedal travels too far to the rear, you can sustain major vascular damage to your leg. So we're talking very serious injuries that could threaten your life.
Following the result, Australian NCAP gave it 4 stars. From last December, Hyundai modified and strengthened all right-hand drive Tucsons, including those manufactured in Europe, for the British market. Australia retested the car and gave it 5 stars. But what about cars bought by British motorists before the modification?
It is going to be unfortunate if you bought one of those cars. Ultimately, you're going to be driving a vehicle that is less safe than the ones that are on sale today, the more recently engineered versions. But the elephant in the room here is really what goes on at ANCAP and Euro NCAP when they assume that left-hand drive test results can be extrapolated to right-hand drive.
Hyundai told dispatchers,
The Australian tested Tucson was not sold in Europe. Hyundai's own test did not match ANCAP findings. The Hyundai Tucson is not unsafe. It has not failed any safety tests either internally or in any markets in which it is sold.
It added,
Hyundai is committed to building cars which comply with all regulations. John Cadigan's views on potential injuries are pure speculation.
Euro NCAP told dispatchers,
Euro NCAP's full-scale crash tests represent situations in which people could be killed or seriously injured. Cars have many different sorts of accidents, many of which would not be life-threatening. This can make real-world data less relevant to the sorts of accidents that Euro NCAP is addressing. Good correlation has been found when severe and fatal accidents are looked at.
it added,
We have looked at manufacturers' data to try to ensure that right-hand drive cars perform as well as left-hand drive.
Regarding the Tucson, it said,
There is no evidence that European-built cars have any issues with floor pan deformation. A 5-star Euro NCAP rating has always been valid.
Coming up, VW's back in the hot seat, this time on safety.
So anyone from there has got the 5 out of 5 one, absolutely.
No, you've got it wrong.
Dispatches is investigating whether the crash rating awarded to our cars is really a safe bet. An organisation called NCAP skillfully films cars in a variety of crash scenarios and awards the safest 5 stars. Most manufacturers volunteer to be part of these ratings and help decide what's tested. But can we trust the industry to tell us the truth? Remember last year, some manufacturers admitted fiddling the figures and fibbing to customers over emissions. Centre stage, the world's biggest car company, VW. They were even called to give evidence to MPs, and they wanted to know if VW was also being shady about safety.
If we can't trust the organisation in terms of emissions testing, the public are right to question, well, can we also trust you in terms of safety?
I really understand why you asked that question, and we have a duty to the public and to the consumers to reassure them with regard to safety, our cars are safe. We've got a big job to regain trust, and we need transparency and openness. Reassured, that's what we will do.
Thing is, we'd heard some VW dealers weren't being accurate about the crucial matter of safety. Their Polo was an NCAP 5-star rated car when it was tested. But that was 7 years ago, and the rating has now expired. To achieve the same score in today's more rigorous tests, it would need more safety features. We visited 8 franchise dealerships.
Hi, how you doing? You're all right, mate? Nice to meet you.
It was the Polo I was looking at, yeah.
Okay.
What would they say about the safety rating?
If you can, one of you can give me a hand. I'm looking for a Polo. Okay. Does that come with like airbags and everything?
Oh, yeah. It's all standard, yeah. 5-star NCAP safety rating.
Okay, great. Would that the 5-star rating be on the 16 plate as well?
Exactly the same. Everything new shape like this is the same. You're all right.
Oh, yeah, it was just I wanted a bit of information. Does it have like a safety rating or anything?
Yeah, they're all 5-star NCAP.
Great.
And the ratings are out of 5, and this has got 5.
And this is the 16 plate?
Brand new, yeah, perfect.
We showed our footage to Steve Fowler, editor of Auto Express magazine for the last 5 years.
The Polos, as standard, have got a 5 out of 5-star safety rating from NCAP.
Oh, okay.
Which has all been tested.
And is that on the 16 plate and the 15? Or
yes,
just...
yeah, because the model or the updated version got done probably about early 2014. So anyone from there has got the 5 out of 5 one, absolutely.
Tested in 2014? No. Polo wasn't tested in 2014, pal. You got it wrong.
That's the real thing.
Remember, these are VW-trained sales staff. Yet of the 8 franchise dealerships we visited, 6 gave us duff info.
That's for the last model, but obviously it's going to get better with its safety rating anyway, so...
Okay.
It's not been checked just yet. It will, most likely will be a 5-star once going through.
Okay, yeah.
You're trusting these people. You're spending an awful lot of money. This is the second biggest purchase you'll ever make, and somebody's giving you wrong information. It's like going and looking at a house and somebody saying, no, the road out there isn't busy, it's only the M25.
When we told Volkswagen of our findings, they said,
We recognise the need to constantly improve the training of our franchise dealer network in relation to communication of the latest safety developments. and regret that the small number of dealer staff involved in this covert filming did not appropriately check and communicate that the 5-star rating of the Polo had expired.
No matter how many crash tests a car is put through, they don't necessarily pick up on every flaw. Certain models of the Vauxhall Zafira had a tendency to catch fire, something which only came to light when thousands were already on the road. Problems like this can only be sorted through a recall. In this case, Vauxhall owners highlighted the problem via social media. But Vauxhall recently admitted it knew about Zafiras catching fire in the 5 years before the recall. So what about other manufacturers?
Now this feels like a very safe car. In there, I'm surrounded by yards of chunky American steel. You get the feeling that other vehicles would just bounce off you in a collision.
It's a Jeep Cherokee, and looking a bit old these days. But back in the early 2000s, along with its big sister, the Grand Cherokee, it sold tens of thousands of vehicles on the forecourts. It was even more popular in America. But then a potentially fatal problem came to light. The former chairman of Chrysler's minivan safety team left the company over a dispute about safety. Paul Sheridan is now an expert witness testifying against his old employer.
The problem is the rear-mounted fuel tank. It's made out of plastic, it's behind the axle, it's below the bumper, it's completely unprotected from a collision. And when the tank breaks and fuel leaks, a fire occurs and the victims in the vehicle burn to death.
An internal Chrysler memo in 1978 warned of the risks associated with rear-mounted fuel tanks. Yet models of Cherokees with this design flaw began rolling off the production line from 1993. 75 people died in Jeep fuel tank fires. Chrysler refused a request from the US government to recall the cars. Then, in 2013, 20 years after it first went into production, they issued a voluntary recall. It came too late for Todd Anderson's 17-year-old son, Skylar.
Skylar hugged me twice before he left, and he drove away. And at some point, a driver in a pickup truck had lost an unsecured load in the form of furniture onto the highway.
Skylar was driving a Jeep Grand Cherokee. As he slowed down to avoid the unexpected obstacle, he was hit from behind and the Jeep burst into flames.
Skylar fought until the end, and fire was such that it consumed 100% of his body. And he had to crawl through jagged glass to get himself out of a vehicle, but he struggled to the end because he loved life. The tragedy in itself was, debilitating emotionally, but what I learned immediately afterward was the vehicle was under recall.
12 months later, the same recall hit UK shores for Grand Cherokees manufactured from 1993 to 1998 and Cherokees built between 2002 and 2007.
More than 30,000 Jeeps with the rear-fitted fuel tank were recalled here in the UK. But we've discovered around 20,000 of those with this potentially lethal flaw have yet to be fixed.
Chrysler says the vehicles are safe. It last sent a UK follow-up recall letter on the 1st of April this year. It's got to be said that overall our cars are safer than they've ever been. And that comes down to pressure from governments, drivers, and yes, manufacturers and NCAP.
But you know, the future isn't about airbags. It's not about crash protection. It's about preventing the bump from happening in the first place. Now, this Honda Jazz has something tricky. This is a laser device, and apparently this is going to prevent me from hitting the vehicle in front, even if I fail to hit the brakes. Fingers crossed.
For our first test, engineers have disabled it. I've never been a crash test dummy before.
Around 1,800 people die on our roads each year, and one of the main problems, drivers just not paying attention. So please remember, keep your eyes on the road at all times. Whoa! Oh God, my heart is going 10 to the dozen. I don't know where my blood pressure is, but it was terrifying. And it's made out of cloth and polystyrene.
Thankfully, it's just the car that needs rebuilding, not me. Time to activate the autonomous emergency brakes. Will the car's laser spot the fake car in front?
I'm driving towards a car. It looks real to me, and I'm not going to press the brakes. I really want to press the brakes now. I want to do it now. I want to do it now. That's scary, but it's impressive. So much of the things that we buy on our cars these days, well, they're just gimmicks, aren't they? But that isn't. That's going to save lives. And I want that on the next car that I buy, that I put my wife and kids in.
But that sort of tech isn't fitted to most of the 36 million vehicles in Britain. With our faith in some car manufacturers at a real low after the emissions scandal, and with the tests failing to address some crashes that could result in life-changing consequences, can you really trust your car to keep you safe?